Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Shape Unplugged. I'm your host, Stephanie Morris, CEO of Shape America, and today I have two amazing guests joining me on the show today. They both happen to serve on our current national task force to revise the K through 12 physical education standards. First, I'm pleased to introduce Sally Jones, who happens to chair this group. She is the Physical and Adapted Physical Education Consultant for North Carolina's Department of Public Instruction. And also joining us is Langston Clark, Associate Professor at the University of Texas at San Antonio. So, hi, Sally. Hi, Langston. Thank you both so much for being on the show today.
Hi, everyone. It is quite an honor to be here with you and look forward to our discussion. As Stephanie said, I work for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I oversee programs related to adapted physical education for the state, as well as support health and physical education and the whole school, whole community, whole child project. But I'm very happy to be with you today to talk about the National Physical Education Standard Revision process.
Hello, Stephanie. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to represent the rest of the group. I'm the primary PEAT person at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm the physical education, teacher education coordinator. UTSA is a Hispanic thriving institution. So we have a diverse population of students that we train, that we inspire to be the best physical education teachers that they can be. And I'm also a researcher, and most of my research deals with issues of race and social justice and physical education and sport.
Fantastic. Thanks so much to both of you. And thank you both again for spending a little time with us on the show today. We are really excited about what we get to talk about today and what our listeners will get to hear about. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, you both serve on our National K through 12 Physical Education Standards Task Force. As you both know, and I'm sure many people listening know, the standards were last revised in 2015. So we can agree that a lot has happened and changed since then. And I'm wondering if you can provide our listeners with a little bit of an inside look, if you will, as to the process that's been underway to accomplish this really important work for our field.
There was a lot that went into before we even first met as a task force. There was a lot of planning and thinking about how we wanted to get this group together and bring them together. So the first time we actually brought the group together virtually, it was strictly just a social meeting. We wanted everybody to have an opportunity to introduce themselves and we get to know each other. We played a few games and we had some laughters going on. It was just a good way to break the ice. It was also important for us as we continued on in the next few meetings that we were able to build trust with one another and to understand collaboration in a virtual environment and to create a culture where everyone felt or feels comfortable sharing their thoughts, their ideas, and being able to actually push back without, just being able to put our egos aside and be able to have a good dialogue. A great deal of our earlier conversations and discussions were centered on the philosophy of physical education and the copious amounts of research that's out there. We also listened to the PEAT Collaborative, the teacher town halls. We had a student survey that we sent out and we reviewed those responses. We have met with other Shape America SIGs, with special interest groups. We also examined and had discourse on physical education standards from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, other states, and our current Shape America standards, as well as other content area standards. We were using various online applications and still do. We use Google Docs frequently, Jamboards, Padlet, etc., so that we could capture our ideas as we started to blueprint our approach to the rewrite. And I say rewrite because it's more like a rewrite than a revision. We would often, and we still do, break up into smaller groups and divide tasks. So in this process, I would say that we've used a backwards design approach that has led us to the development of our draft guiding principles and our student attributes and standards. So I want to let Langston share his perspective on that question.
I'm a Marvel Comics fan. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So when I think back to how we all were recruited and gathered into this process, I think of Michelle Carter being Samuel L. Jackson, like she's Nick Fury, right? And then Sally is like Iron Man. She's like Tony Stark, right? So they gathered all of these people together who, most of whom I don't think knew each other. I think I only knew one person on the committee before I actually joined it. And we have had tons of dialogue and conversations with people from different walks of physical education. And so there are folks who are current teachers, there are folks who are coordinators of physical education at the district level. Of course, we know Sally's at the state level. We have teacher educators, scholars, expert teachers. We have someone working in the CDC. And so one of the things that I think people should know in terms of what has happened internally is that this process has been one whereby people from varying perspectives of physical education, from varying vantage points, have come together to create the best standards possible to meet the needs of children in the United States and Canada.
I love the Marvel reference. That's pretty fabulous. You truly are a group of Avengers, but not avenging anything. That's, but a group of superheroes that are really coming together with very strong skills in different areas and finding ways to combine those skills to achieve something great. So I love that example. And thank you for sharing, both of you, your reflections on everything to date. So let's talk about diversity for a quick minute. You definitely, both of you touched on it in different ways, but it is a wonderful thing, just a truly awesome achievement in many ways that the individuals serving in this group, there is great diversity reflected and represented on so many levels. What are each of you most excited about in terms of the opportunity to work with such a diverse group of professionals in this physical education space?
One of the things that I reflect on quite frequently is just how we all get along and share space and conversation together. Every person on the task force brings an incredible amount of experience that has shaped their personal epistemology. And as we engage and have discourse and all the various topics that we have, and we have lots of topics and lots of different angles that we have to engage in, the sharing of everyone's knowledge pushes, and when I say push, it's always a gentle push, but pushes each one of us to interact with whatever we're talking about and discussing in ways that we may not have done so before. I would say, and I think that, and I won't say the person's name, but it has been said multiple times by multiple people in the task force, they feel like they're getting a level of professional development each time we meet. And I would say, I feel the same way. I get off that meeting and my head is still spinning. It's still processing what it has been said, what we're thinking. And if I'm being honest, I usually don't sleep after a meeting because my head is just so wrapped up in processing all the information that was provided. So that's just been the thing that I've really enjoyed about this work so far.
I think I may be one of those people that say that participating in our discussions is a lot like a professional development. And so one of the things that I appreciate about Michelle and Sally's leadership in this endeavor is that they have been able to create an environment, foster an environment where different people, not only who are just different professionally, but there's ethnic and gender and all types of differences included into this group of people who are making the standards. And there aren't the same type of tensions that we see reflected in the media or what we think may be happening in the broader society. And so I hope that sort of collaboration, those diverse perspectives are reflected in a way that the standards are presented to the public. And I think that they will be. I think that people will see the varying perspectives that we've all had, but the peace and the collegiality, the friendliness that we bring to the process will be reflected in those standards.
What an awesome opportunity that each of you can see for yourselves and for the other members of the task force, that you learn from each other as people and as professionals as you go through this work and contribute your individual perspectives and expertise as well to the revision of these standards. That's just wonderful. So thank you both for sharing that. So let's also talk about the fact that coming up pretty quickly will be the opportunity for public review and comment on the draft standards. And of course, we are really committed to a very comprehensive process and going out to every group within the HPE field, every individual we can find, to invite them in to review what's been drafted and offer input on it. As we approach that point in time, what do you want our listeners to know about the draft standards before that happens?
We have taken an approach where we also looked at who we are as individuals. This goes back to the diversity question that you asked, and thought about what do we most value or bring to this process. And so we have some guiding principles that will help the public understand where we are coming from in the development of our standards, because we know that we can't separate who we are from the process, and we want it to be very honest and candid about that in our approach. And so one of the things I think that people may view those guiding standards as almost like standards for the way in which physical education teachers should approach or think about how they go about implementing the standards in teaching. And so that is something I think that people will find to be novel in the way that we develop the standards, but also something that maybe is a new standard for the way we think about how we develop standards. I want to be clear that the guiding principles themselves are not meant to be the standard, but meant to be sort of like an honest showcase of who we are as we went about developing those standards. One other point, because we know that concepts related to social justice and equity are hot topics right now, particularly around education. And I want to talk briefly about a conversation we had related to ideas of being culturally relevant or culturally sustaining. One thing that I want people to take away from the draft of the standards is that we're taking an approach where culture is not meant to be a limiting factor in the way that we want our students to be taught. So I'll give an example. There's a stereotypical belief that like all Black people play basketball, right? And so if those students are interested in basketball and it's rooted in their culture, that doesn't mean that basketball should be the only thing that they're learning. But we want to use the students' culture as a scaffold for other sort of opportunities for them to engage in play, in sport, and physical activity, and the joy of movement, but not have that culture be a limiting factor for what we should be exposing them to as physical educators.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Langston. I think it will really help give some context and perspective as we move forward and when we are ready to invite members of the community into sharing their feedback on what's coming together. So thank you.
Yeah, can I add a few things to that?
Of course.
So one of the things that I also want our listeners to know is that the task force has tried to hear all voices. As I mentioned before, we've listened and had conversations from the Peak Collaborative that was talking about the standards. We've listened to town halls We've engaged in conversations with other groups. We've tried to get a student perspective, because we not only are we speaking to the teachers in the field, but we also have to, that we're also speaking and thinking about our higher ed faculty. We're thinking about state leaders. We're thinking about those that are in positions very similar to mine. We're also thinking about schools and their districts and their context that they have. We have been thinking about all the nuances as it relates to physical education and to all the people that it impacts. And so this is our best effort to date to speak to all of those people. Because what we do know is that this rewrite is going to have an impact on many of the other documents that are out there, especially documents that Shape America has created. It's probably going to impact and require revision on many of those other documents that are out there. So we haven't gone into this or haven't thought of, there's probably not one thing. I'm sure there are some things that we haven't thought about, but we've tried to be very considerate of all the nuances as it relates to physical education and address those. So that is something that I feel that it would be pertinent for those folks reading our guiding principles and our student attributes and our draft standards to realize as they are trying to give our valuable feedback to us.
Thank you, Sally. And I'll chime in and share that I had the unique opportunity to visit and be a fly on the wall, if you will, at the last meeting of the task force. And I truly got to just listen and absorb and reflect on the discussion that was taking place. And so I echo everything you just said. And what I was truly struck by was the dedication that each member of this task force has to really hearing those different voices from the field and from the parents and the students and the teachers to really consider those voices in this work. So really exciting. And thank you again for sharing all that. So when you imagine the end of this process and finally being able to share with the world a fully revised or rewritten set of standards, what are your biggest hopes and dreams about what that looks like?
It's funny, Langston and I had a conversation about this the other day, and I think mutually we both hope that educators use them. We want educators to use them to create curricula, for states to use them as a way to support their own process in writing and revising their own standards, to use them as a way to create professional development within their districts or schools. So it's very important for us that these are accessible and people use them in an intentional manner. With that said, I think that I would be remiss not to mention that it's going to be extremely critical when these are fully revised, that we are very intentional with how we roll them out, how Shape America rolls these out, and that we make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to learn how to best use these guiding principles and student attributes and standards.
I would agree with that. I think the word accessible that Sally used is the first thing that came to mind for me. I want the standards to be accessible in the sense that they are used. I think that the standards aren't curriculum and they aren't pedagogy necessarily, but they influence both of those. And I would hope that I do hope that the standards influence the implementation of curriculum and instruction in physical education in a positive way, such that teachers are seeing the possibilities for high quality physical education for all of our students. And I want to give a shout out. I have to give a shout out. We also have an adapted PE perspective on the task force as well. And so that's one of the things that I think people will find in the standards, that it is meant to be accessible for all students.
You know, I understand and recognize that our last standards were revised in 2015. And in this process, it is more of a rewrite. But I think as the task force has looked at the Australian physical education curriculum and standards, as well as the New Zealand, even though they are dated, they still have a level of relevance. And I'm hoping that these will continue to have relevance ongoing, and that 5 years down the road, when there's the need to look at these and see if they need revision, that the next group coming up it's going to be a revision and rather than a rewrite, that they still hold relevance. So that's another kind of hope and dream that I have related to these standards.
You know what's interesting, Sally, as you bring that up, you know, we talked about physical literacy a lot. And I think the last time the standards got presented, physical literacy appeared, and people didn't feel like they had a say-so in how physical literacy appeared in the standards, right? And so one of the hopes I have this time is that people actually feel like they have some say-so and some buy-in, right, and are actual stakeholders into the standards, because they actually got to participate in some way or influence how the standards came to be.
I echo your hopes for that opportunity for people to have buy-in and people to give voice and share feedback to what they see coming together. I also think that, you know, if I may, I'm going to chime in here and share my hopes and dreams for these revised standards, which I don't often do, but I'm just going to say that you all are going in a really bold direction. You know, you came together and you really challenged each other to think about what is right for students and how our teachers can deliver that through standards-based physical education programs. And you've really taken some bold steps, and you're moving in some very different directions for our field. And I'm really excited about that. And I know that with what's coming, we'll hear all the feedback, but I'm also really committed to making sure that that feedback is inclusive and that we are hearing from all the groups that haven't had a chance to give voice in the past, haven't had a chance to see themselves reflected in this process. Because I truly believe that the approach that you're taking will resonate with them, and that they will feel excited about what's coming together. And so that's my big hope, and my wish is that we see that really come together in terms of just that feeling of, wow, this is bold, this is different, and we're excited and we're ready to embrace it. So with that, I will say thank you both so much for your time and being on the show today. I have so much appreciation for the work that each of you are doing on this task force, for the incredible amounts of time that you have given to this work, as well as every other member of the task force. It's been a lot this past year, but I know it will be worth it. And just, I hope you know how much you are appreciated by me and the entire field. With that, any final words for our listeners today?
I just want to thank you for having us. I appreciate the opportunity to even be on a task force. And I look forward to hearing from the community and getting their feedback so we can continue to make improvements.
Our work this is just 2 documents. There is more to come, a lot more to come. You're only, what's coming up for review is just a small portion of the work that we've been able to do so far. Like I said, it's the guiding principles and it's the student attributes, which is leading to our draft standards. but that's not where we stop. We still have to look at our outcomes and what those outcomes are going to look like. And so that document is not going to be available yet, obviously, but it is coming. So I don't want people to freak out and when they only see these two documents. But these are just the first two documents out of many documents that have to be created. And I just feel so honored and humbled to be a part of this really important work. And I have to shout out to the task force, all the members. They are doing such an amazing job. And it's hard to get everyone together to meet, and there's challenges. But I appreciate the effort that they have put in to this work. And so we look forward to everyone's voice and feedback as we go through. So thank you.
Fantastic. And yeah, I will just echo that to your point, and to something you touched on earlier, Sally. I think it's also really incumbent upon Shape America to make sure that we are doing our part to communicate that more is coming, that it's not just this, that we'll be asking for the community's feedback on. So we will make sure to double down on that communications effort. And when we are ready with final standards, final rewritten, oh my gosh, here they are, brand new standards. I also acknowledge that it will be incumbent upon us to make sure that there are resources being delivered with those standards to ease the implementation, that there's professional development opportunity, that there are all the different materials that can be produced, in different languages to make it easy to adopt and to teach to these standards. So more on all of this to come. I have a feeling the three of us could just keep talking about all of this because there are so many exciting things to talk about and reflect on, but we will close it out there for today. Thank you again, Sally and Langston, for your time and being our guests today on Shape Unplugged. And to everybody listening, thank you for your time in joining us today for this really, really insightful show on what's happening with the physical education standards. And I hope that you continue to tune in. Thank you. Bye-bye.